Hey everyone, it's Coach Hill, back to talk about the new PF topics for October. If you don't know what they are, we're going to briefly go through both of them, and hopefully next week you can vote for your favorite. Let's begin with resolved. The United States should substantially reduce its military support of Taiwan. First up, the 9-dash line. Also their confrontation with the Philippines. Keep in mind that international law is against the 9-dash line. Next, we move on to resources. Remember, under the South China Sea, they have discovered huge amounts of natural gas. China wants that gas. Also, there is the idea of seafood. A lot of the food that feeds the 1.4 billion Chinese that exist comes out of the South China Sea, and that's in competition directly with the Philippines and other countries who also use those areas for fishing. We have to look at strategic positions. Don't forget that China has been building military bases throughout the South China Sea, actually creating islands on which they have been putting runways and other military facilities. Then there is the tech war. If we continue to battle in this way, it will escalate tech war, the use of more advanced drones, more advanced missiles, and of course, artificial intelligence that has the potential to go out of control and become the whole Terminator thing. Going to the environment, fishing, as we've talked about, and sustainability. What happens if we relax and China begins to go in and overfish or drill or do other things that harms the international environment as well as the South China Sea's natural environment? Going to social, we of course have all the isms from capitalism to communism to all of those. And there's the idea of tripolarity. This is an old argument in which we see the world being carved up into three different places. In this case, it would be perhaps the United States and then Europe and then Asia. So we see that starting to take place. There's also the idea of hegemony, which we call hedge. The idea that the United States has to be in charge because we are the only ones that keep control. We're the world police. And if we are not in charge, the world will fall. There's the idea of expansionism, which is what China has been accused of with their Belt and Road Initiative. Do we have the right to block them going into smaller countries like Cambodia, where I live? There is the Belt and Road Initiative. Remember, if the United States stops expansion into Taiwan, it thereby stops other expansionist plans that reach out into places like Vietnam and other areas in the South China Sea. There's also the idea of sovereignty. The idea in international law is that a country is entitled to 200 miles off their coast. That is their sovereign land. China doesn't see it that way, and they are not shy of violating sovereignty to get fish or anything else they want. Going to the economy, it's very simple. He or she who controls the chips controls the world. It's all about Taiwan's microchips because remember, they make 95% of the world's most advanced chips. If China gets their hands on that, it's going to be a problem for the rest of the world, but it's going to be wonderful for them. Next is trade. Never forget that the South China Sea is key to world trade. We saw this during COVID. We saw it again when we had trade disruptions last year. It's key to keep that area clear because most of the world's shipping is going to come through that area at one point or another. Then there is the idea of MAD, mutually assured destruction. We recognize that war is bad for business. Yes, the United States and China could go to war, but they depend on each other economically. What would that do to our economy? You might win in the short time, either side, but it could turn into disaster for whatever is left. Moving on to the next topic choice. The United States federal government should eliminate its intercontinental ballistic missiles. There's a lot of issues here. First of all, with the economy, the military-industrial complex. Yes, war is good for business. We supply a lot of weapons to our own military and to militaries around the world, most notably Ukraine. That makes us a lot of money and funds future military research. There's also resources. Never forget that the reason we have weapons in different places around the world is to control access to resources such as oil, such as shipping lanes. A lot of this you'll see in this and the previous topic. From a societal standpoint, we can look at tech bad. More missiles that are able to fly without humans means we're more likely to use missiles. We don't see the loss of life, so war is no big deal. We can talk about bigger, badder weapons, and there's of course all of the things associated with nuclear proliferation, arms race, arms treaties, all of those sorts of things that are going to be coming up in this topic. The interesting thing about this topic, and we'll talk about it in a moment in pros and cons, is that this topic can be collapsed back to a morality argument. We'll talk about that later. Looking at the international order, we have hegemony that I talked about before, as well as tripolarity. We also have the idea of sovereign. Do we have a right to defend ourselves, and how much defense are we allowed to have? There is deterrence, both conventional and nuclear. There is arms race, both conventional and nuclear. And then there's the idea of treaties. We had a lot of arms control treaties, especially during the 70s and the 80s when we felt that the nuclear threat was really bad. I think it's worse now, but there's all kinds of treaties in place we would have to look at.